Hello, and welcome to the Freight Flow Advisor Brief. This weekend, I read an article published by Carl Warren. He's the president and chief executive officer of North Carolina Railroad. And the premise of the article was really about rail infrastructure and the North Carolina advantage. So it's no surprise to me as I continued to research that the same theme was consistent. CNBC has ranked North Carolina the #1 state to do business 3 times in 4 years. So what do you think is actually driving those rankings? Most people would say workforce, tax policy, the regulatory climate. And sure, I think all of those matter. But let me tell you what I think actually makes the machine run. That's infrastructure, specifically rail infrastructure. North Carolina has built one of the most efficient rail freight networks in the United States. It's backed by $41.5 million in active investment, 88,000 rail-supported jobs, and a 317-mile corridor connecting ports, manufacturers, and intermodal hubs. And it was all done with zero taxpayer dollars. So let's start with the NCRR, or the North Carolina Railroad Company. They currently operate a 317-mile corridor that runs from Charlotte through Research Triangle and connects directly into CSX and Norfolk Southern's Class 1 networks. So here's what the corridor generates annually. $20 billion in economic output, $247 million in tax revenue, 15,000 jobs along the corridor itself, 88,000 jobs statewide when you count freight, passenger, and rail-served industries. Now pause on that for a second. $20 billion in annual output. That's not cumulative. That's per year. And here's the kicker. NCRR funds all of its economic development programs using private revenue. So it's not in the state budget. Carl Warren, NCRR's president and CEO, has been saying this for years. Quote, primed industrial sites are a critical component of North Carolina's infrastructure for supporting business recruitment and expansion. And he's not wrong, because when you're a manufacturer evaluating a site, the question isn't simply around labor. It's also around being able to move product efficiently and at scale without blowing up cost per ton mile. Rail definitely answers that question. And unfortunately, trucking does not. So that brings me to the investment happening right now. In January of 2026, the North Carolina's Department of Transportation Rail Division announced $16.3 million in rail infrastructure grants. And that's through its freight rail and rail crossing safety improvement program. When you add railroad company matches and North Carolina Ports Authority contributions, total investments hit about $41.5 million. So here's what's getting upgraded. 95 miles of track, 8 railroad bridges and culverts, a dozen short line railroads receiving direct capital, Port of Morehead City getting rail scale installation and track upgrades, Wilmington Terminal Railroad getting mainline and switch improvements. Jason Orthner, director of North Carolina's Department of Transportation Rail Division, said it clearly, quote, by working closely with our railroad partners, we are strengthening reliability and resiliency, supporting businesses across the state, and reinforcing the rail infrastructure that drives North Carolina's economy. That's not political language at all. That's a sound logistics strategy. So let's talk about the money really quick. And I'm going to use real numbers. Rail freight cost average $70.27 per net ton. OTR trucking is near $215 per ton. That's a 67% premium. On a per ton mile basis, rail runs 2 to 4 cents. Trucking runs 8 to 20 cents. That's a 3 to 5 times cost gap. And that compounds rapidly at scale. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I don't have direct rail access, and that's fine. But let's talk multimodal. If you combine rail for the long haul and truck for the short haul, your blended cost comes in around $95 per net ton. That's still 55% cheaper than riding with trucks. So even if you're not on a spur, if you're anywhere near an intermodal terminal or a transload facility, you can really capture most of that rail efficiency. And I know it's been pushed to the back burner, but there is an environmental play here. Rail produces 70% fewer emissions per ton mile. That's EPA data. So if you have ESG commitments or Scope 3 reporting obligations or customers asking hard questions about your carbon footprint, modal shift to rail isn't just a cost play. It's a reputational and compliance play. One of the things that's impressive is North Carolina didn't just build rail infrastructure and hope businesses would show up. They built programs to operationalize it. I'm going to give you 2 examples. Number 1, Build Ready Sites. This is NCRR's flagship grant initiative. They offer up to $750,000 per site for rail-served industrial land development. They prioritize rural and economically distressed communities. Since 2021, they've awarded $11.7 million across more than 20 counties, and that created over 4,000 acres of rail-served, development-ready industrial land. Most recently, the town of Spencer and Wayne County each received $750,000 to strengthen their industrial recruitment pipelines. Moving to number 2, NCRR Invest. This program funds rail spur construction, engineering, and infrastructure for businesses actively locating along the corridor. If you want a flagship example, Siemens Mobility has a new $220 million advanced manufacturing facility in Lexington, and that's going to create 500 jobs by 2028. It received $1 million in NCRR investment grants. In Hertford County, U.S. Forged Rings got $600,000 to connect to freight rail. Once operational, they'll move at least 1,800 rail cars annually. And that's not subsidy, that's strategic capital investment. All right, quick break. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably asking smarter questions about freight than most people in your organization. But here's the problem. Getting accurate cost data is still way too hard. You're constantly having to call carriers, wait on quotes, and build out spreadsheets. That's the problem that Freight FA solves. Freight FA is an AI-powered freight intelligence tool that will give you instant cost estimates across multiple modes. Think truck, rail, air. And it's all there so that you can make smarter, faster shipping decisions. So here's what you get when you visit Freight FA. You get Freight GPT, our 24/7 freight analyst that will answer any question in plain English. You get real-time pricing intelligence because we pull live market data so that your estimates reflect what's actually going on in the market. We'll give you modal comparisons. Want to know if rail is cheaper than truck? We'll show it to you. So look, if you're a CEO or supply chain VP trying to control cost and improve network efficiency, visit freightfa.com and see what your freight is actually costing you. Remember, that's freightfa.com. All right, let's pivot back to North Carolina because it's about to get a little bit more interesting. The CSX Carolina Connector, also called CCX, is a 330-acre intermodal terminal in Halifax County. It provides shippers with access to Chicago and Northwest Ohio in 5 days via the Wilmington Midwest Express. The terminal handles approximately 264,000 lifts annually, and it reaches more than 5 million consumers within a 120-mile radius. So here's the play. Port of Wilmington or Morehead City for global inbound. CCX for domestic distribution. Short line rail for first and last mile delivery. The rail is the spine, and truck is the nerve endings. That's the network design that sophisticated shippers are running, and North Carolina has built the infrastructure to support it. So I don't want to just focus on today because it's important to know that North Carolina Department of Transportation released its comprehensive state rail plan in late 2025. And this establishes the strategic vision for North Carolina's rail network through the next 30 years. Increased access to ports and inland freight facilities, grade separation and crossing improvements, expansion of direct rail served industrial sites, continued development of the Southeast corridor for passenger and freight. The Triangle region is also advancing a strategic rail infrastructure investment study backed by a $105 million CRISI grant. And this is for improvements on both the NCRR and Norfolk Southern routes. So here's my point. North Carolina is a state thinking in decades, not political cycles. All right. As we wrap this up, let's talk about what this really means for you. Listen, if you're a manufacturer or distributor, North Carolina has to be on your short list with all of its rail network improvements and build-ready sites. If you're a logistics provider or a 3PL, the $41 million in rail upgrades means better service reliability. And if you're a site selector, North Carolina now has more than 4,000 acres of BRS certified rail-ready industrial land. So here's the bottom line. Rail isn't just a part of North Carolina's infrastructure story. It is the story. None of this is accidental. It's the result of deliberate, long-term capital allocation decisions by both private and public stakeholders who understand that in freight and logistics, infrastructure matters. Just remember, in a global economy where supply chain resilience and cost per ton mile define competitive positioning, North Carolina's rail network is not just an asset, it's an advantage. If you've enjoyed the show today, make sure to share it with a colleague. You can follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook at the Freight Flow Advisor, and you can read our in-depth articles that are curated with each podcast on substack.com. Just head over there and search the Freight FA Brief. And while you're there, make sure to subscribe. And last, you can listen to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and Substack. Until next time, this has been your Freight Flow Advisor Brief.